Welcome to the Grewalz Show. I'm your host Gurinder Singh Grewal. आप सबनु मेरे ਵੱਲੋਂ सत श्री अकाल. Today on the show we have through Skype Miss Marit Stiles, MPP, NDP, Davenport area. Welcome Marit to the show.
Hi, it's great to be here, Gurinder. I'm so excited to be on the Grewalz Show.
Marit, as we all know, due to COVID, we cannot do in-studio interviews, so everything's being done over Skype, so thank you for taking our request to come on the show. So right in the beginning, I want to find out from you, Marit, tell us about yourself, because our viewers have never met you. They want to know who Marit is.
Yeah, well, I'm a first-time member of provincial parliament. I was elected in 2018 to represent the riding of Davenport, which is in sort of downtown West End Toronto. A lot of my riding is Portuguese speaking. It has the largest number of Portuguese speaking Canadians in any part of the country. And so that makes it interesting. And I was a school board trustee for the Toronto District School Board before I ran for provincial representation. And before that, I worked for many years for ACTRA, which is the union that represents actors in television and radio and film in Canada.
So as we all understand, you're the education critic for the NDP, and NDP is the opposition in Ontario. So when you became the education critic, what was on your mind? What did you want to do on day one?
Well, I had been, as I said, a school board trustee for a few years beforehand. And so I'd seen some of the issues we were facing in our schools. The fact that some of our schools are in very bad disrepair, the fact that in many areas we don't have enough schools, we have students too crammed together in our schools. And I really wanted to see our publicly funded education system better supported by our government. So I was very interested in that. And I was really excited when our leader, Andrea Horvath, asked me to be the opposition education critic. It's kind of like being the shadow minister. So I get to learn a lot, and I get to speak to a lot of teachers, a lot of parents, a lot of students, and bring their concerns to Queen's Park.
Well, as you're aware, most of our viewers are Punjabi or of the Indian origin, and they want to make sure that everybody is educated, because maybe they were not fully educated when they came to Canada and they went into the workforce, but they want their kids to be having the best of the education in the world. So having said that, as I understand, you also grew up in Toronto and you had all your schooling done in Toronto?
Well, actually, I grew up in Newfoundland on the east coast of Canada, and schools were very different there. There was a lot of poverty. So our public education system was really the big equalizer for people in Newfoundland. And here in Toronto, I see it sort of the same way, right? We have lots of people from all kinds of backgrounds and experiences. And what's really important is that we do have a very good education system here. We rank very high in the world, actually, but we can always do better. And I hear that a lot from parents as well. And I hear it from teachers, and I hear it from students. We can always do better. We can improve. And we need to, because we need to be able to keep up and make sure that our students are prepared for how the world is changing in the 21st century.
So Marit, while you were a school board trustee, was there anything which was always like in the back of your mind that if you were able to make some changes, that you will make this as the change of the century kind of thing? What was that?
Well, I think probably the issue that I'm the most concerned about is making sure that our children have the support they need, and our youth, the mental health support they need going through school. And you really see that now in the middle of this pandemic, where it's become a crisis for so many families. I feel that our schools are the hubs of our communities, and they should be able to provide that kind of support for students and for families. I'm also really concerned about students who have special needs. And I think that our system has not done a good enough job of supporting kids who have obstacles, whether it's learning challenges or other obstacles. So I want to do the best we can to support those students. And I think we have a long road ahead.
So our education minister, Minister Lecce, when he announced in March of 2020 that schools will be closed, what were you thinking about it at that point?
Well, there's no question that they had to close the schools, and that was coming. It was a very strong direction from the public health side, and we want to listen to them and defer to them. But it was extremely hard for families, no question, and also for the people that work in our schools, the teachers who had to migrate to working online, the students who didn't all have access to good Wi-Fi or the technology to make it work. So I think we saw. We had a lot of struggles in those first few months, but there was no question it was the right thing to do. I guess where the Minister of Education and I differ is I really feel that from the moment that happened, even before, they should have been thinking about and planning for what was going to happen when school returned, because we knew school would come back, whether it was in the spring or whether it was in the fall. And there was a lot of work that needed to be done. And I feel like the government fell a bit behind, certainly in preparing.
And should the government now, with the second wave in full force, should they have shut down the schools?
Well, I think should they close down the schools now? I think
or even like maybe a couple of weeks before they should have closed down.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think they did the right thing and the timing was okay in the spring. But right now, I think that it's really down to our public health units. Each community is different. We have just heard that in Windsor, they're closing schools starting on Monday, and they may not reopen them until after the holidays, and they may even extend beyond that. And the reason they're doing that is they're seeing a large number of cases in schools because they're finally doing testing in schools. And that's the same thing that's happening here in the GTA, right? We're starting to see the numbers increase because we're finally doing the testing that really I think should have been happening all throughout this. So we really have a better sense now of what the number is of students that are infected in our schools, even the kids who don't show symptoms, and the staff, and the numbers are climbing higher each day. So it is very concerning. I haven't heard yet that there's any plan for Peel or Toronto to close the schools, but I know they are listening and looking very carefully at the numbers.
But so if they do not close the schools now and the Christmas break comes into the timeline, you think schools will still reopen as the same time frame, like the first week of Jan, that they will reopen?
I think that's going to really depend on how things go over the holidays. When I'm talking to medical experts and epidemiologists, what they're saying is there's some good things about closing schools, and then there's some bad things. One of the things we don't want to see is that schools close down and then families really have very few choices. And that has been, I think, one of the lessons of COVID, is that a lot of our families, a lot of people in our communities have work where if they don't show up, they're going to lose their jobs, and they're certainly not going to get paid. That's why we've been really calling for paid sick leave, paid sick days for anybody who has to stay home with COVID. It is one of the reasons why a lot of families end up having to make a difficult choice to send their children to school, even if, somebody in their family might be suffering from COVID, or even if they think they may have been exposed. So we want to give everybody the support they need. And I think that's my concern right now, is if you shut down schools, but you're not supporting those families and those students to stay home, then we might actually end up with a worse outbreak at the end.
So we've been in the COVID situation for the last almost 8 months, and NDP has always asked for those paid sick days, sick leave for everybody. You think that will ever come into play?
I really hope so. I think it's going to be harder and harder for the government to not go ahead with that. And part of the reason for that, again, is because if you are looking at numbers continuing to increase, and particularly in schools, and if the school boards in Peel or Toronto, if they decide to shut down schools, then that's going to leave so many families without any options. And I think the government's under a lot of pressure to provide those paid sick days. The other thing we've really pushed hard for is smaller class sizes. And it is extraordinary to me that the government would have proceeded with the same size classes as you had back before schools closed in March. We know that everything we know, and all the experts that are telling us, and every experience from around the world, is that you've got to create space between students. in schools. You've got to create better ventilation. So you need to have HEPA filters and you need to have windows that open. All of those things are important. And also, the most successful lockdowns are when you actually support people at home. So it's one thing for us to scold people and say, no, you shouldn't be going to work, but when we don't give them any support, what option do they have? So I think there's a good chance they'll still do it, but we have to push really hard. And the government's making a lot of excuses, but at the end of the day, we know that they're also sitting on $12 billion of federal relief money that they haven't spent. So they could spend
Marit, we're going to go on a short break. When we come back, we will be talking about the money which the PC government is sitting on and what have they done with the money in the education system. So keep on watching the Grewalz Show. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Grewalz Show. I'm your host, Gurinder Singh Grewal. Today in my show, I have Marit Stiles, NDP, MPP, education critic with me, and we're discussing education in Ontario as it sits right now. Welcome back, Marit.
Oh, it's great to be back.
Marit, as we were discussing about the $12 billion, I know, and everybody watching the show knows that only in Canada, the government has given out so much money to the provinces, to businesses, to individuals around the world. Nothing like this has happened anywhere. But now we have a situation, as far as you're concerned, that there's a lot of money sitting with the PC government. Education Minister Lecce has control over that money with the Honorable Premier Doug Ford. What do you say about that?
Yeah, the Financial Accountability Office, which is an independent wing of government, look at how the government is spending money and where they're allocating money. And what they've done is looked at what the money is that has been put aside for COVID relief. And they've said that the government, as of September, had not spent $12 billion of that relief money. Now, the government is saying, well, we're starting to spend some of that. But it goes to show, what were they waiting for? Here we are in the second wave, in the second lockdown. Businesses are struggling. Schools are struggling to stay open. People are actually getting very sick, and some people are dying. Why were they waiting? What were they waiting for? So I think it's really unfortunate. We know, for example, in education, as I was saying earlier, we know that if with a little bit more funding, we could have much smaller class sizes, which would help us keep those students and the teachers and other staff safe. And the government has refused to do that. And the only reason that they have is because of money. But we know now that the money is there. So why aren't they spending that money, and why aren't they investing now so that we can keep our communities open?
Well, when all this money thing came into play and the schools were going to open, apparently there was a lot of news that money is being spent on stuff being sent to the schools, the computers. There have been changes made to the school. Did any of those things ever happen in Ontario?
Well, the government, mostly what happened was they shared technology in the schools. The school boards got laptops out of schools and delivered them to students. And good for the school boards for doing that. The government has given them a bit more money to replace some of those devices in schools. But what I'm hearing from schools is that they still don't have most of those. And then the other issue is ventilation, as we were talking about. So yes. The government announced $50 million in late August for schools to be renovated to have better HVAC systems. But the reality is, we have no sense right now of whether or not that was all spent. We don't know. And we don't see the impact in schools. A lot of our schools still have windows that don't even open. And that's a problem, obviously, right now as we're fighting COVID. So it's not just a question of it's a question of, was the money spent? And did it have any impact? And why did they wait so long? They had the whole spring and summer when we could have been doing this work to get schools ready for September 1st.
Now, you being the NDP, the official opposition, are you folks ready to have the schools fully reopen in January itself?
I think that the most important thing is that the schools open safely. So again, it will be up to local public health units, I think, to a great extent, whether or not they decide they need to, for some reason, keep schools closed for a few extra weeks. But if they're going to do that, it means that everybody has to move online again. And are we ready for that? Are students ready for that? Are families ready for that? Can families stay home? That's the question. I'm hoping that the government uses the next few weeks to really push hard to fix the windows in our schools so they can open, get HEPA filters out to everybody. And also, let's do the kind of testing and tracing that needs to happen to keep our schools safe. So we really know what's happening out there. And that shouldn't just be happening in a few hotspots. It should be happening everywhere. And I think that's really, really crucial. And the government has time to do that. It's too bad that they've moved so slowly. But I think if we do all of those things and move quickly, we'll be in a much better position to reopen in January.
Now, as you being the education critic, I'm sure lots of teachers still meet up with you. They give their concerns to you so that you can relay them into the legislature. As we are out in the public, there are teachers who don't want to do online classes. They want to go in class because apparently they're saying that the online classes are taking much more of their time all through the day and evening for their schooling, and they're not getting paid enough. Is that true?
Well, what I've found is that for the most part, teachers that I've spoken to, and I've talked to teachers across the province, many of them, and what I find is generally they're working really hard at in school and out of school. And they have done a lot if they're working online, then they put in a lot of time over the summer to get ready. And I haven't heard too many complaints about that, actually. What I hear from teachers is that they are getting tired. And that the government should probably be providing a little bit more support. I think they'd rather see more support for students, more professional development, help for them to help them learn how to use some of these tools better. That's really crucial for the teachers. I haven't heard too many of them complain about pay at all. What I've heard is mostly, though, that they are getting tired, and the constantly changing direction they're getting makes it really hard. Like in any job, you have to constantly change and shift and move to part-time online and part-time in school. It's hard, but I feel like I have to say, as a system, I think students and teachers have done extraordinarily well considering how difficult this has been.
Now, as we all know, before COVID, our Premier Doug Ford had said that teachers will be tested almost every year, that they're fully educated, they know their math, they know their English. Do you agree with those things?
Well, look, I mean, I think that, it's one thing to test people, but if you're not giving them support in professional development support, then we're not really we're doing a real disservice. So one of the things that just came out was a study by the Auditor General that said that our curriculum isn't really keeping up. And also, we're not, the government isn't providing teachers with enough professional development to keep their skills up and the curriculum updated. So I think that's more of a concern, really. And the government brought in a new math curriculum, and I'm fine with a new math curriculum. But again, just dropping it without supporting and helping people to learn how to teach it the best way possible, supporting students and families, is a bit of a problem, because we know that our students struggle. Our families struggle to support our students. So if you want to introduce a new curriculum, that's fine, but you've got to make sure that you invest to make sure that everybody has the support they need to make the most of that.
Now, with the second wave in full force in Ontario, and again, Christmas holidays right in front of us, as we all know, everything's going to shut down, including the government offices. How will you handle the situation with the money not being spent in the schools by the PC government?
Well, the government, Mr. Ford, the Premier, just shut down the legislature early, actually, this week. And we were really surprised in the opposition NDP, because we think in the middle of a pandemic, we need to keep asking important questions. We need to keep making the changes that people are asking us to make. So I'm very concerned about that. Now, of course, I'm not, we're none of us are going on vacation right away. There's lots of other work that needs to be done. But you're right. It is an awkward time, holidays, and certainly everybody deserves to have some time with their, off and some holiday time. But again, I really think if the government was serious about trying to control the outbreak of COVID and get everybody back up and running in the new year as soon as possible, the way to do that is to make sure that we are using these opportunities to invest, to, as you said, spend some of that money, that $12 billion. Maybe it means spending a little extra money to get construction into schools to fix things like windows. Maybe it means providing more testing in the meantime, rushing it out. These are the kinds of things that government needs to be doing. Instead, what the Ford government has done is they've been reacting instead of being proactive. They haven't been preparing, they've just been reacting. And I think that's, in part why we find ourselves where we are right now.
Marit, as we all know, COVID, no one knew that COVID is coming. No one knew that the schools will be shut down. No one knew that the world will be at a standstill, but it happened. But when it happened in Ontario, it was a PC government. Doug Ford was our honorable premier in Ontario. Let's say if we change tables and NDP was the ruling party and you were the education minister, what would have been the three things you would have done differently than what Minister Lecce did?
Well, first of all, I think as a government, the NDP would have brought in paid sick leave to make sure that everybody could properly isolate and protect each other. That's the first thing. But in terms of schools, absolutely, we would have worked really hard to have smaller class sizes so that every child should be in a class of no more than 15 students. So we have proper spacing to limit the spread of COVID-19. And that would be really, really important. And then the other thing I think is being a bit proactive, trying to work a little harder to make sure that our students and our staff, teachers, have supports they need in this really difficult time.
Well, Marit, now the show is coming to an end. What would you like to tell us viewers? Any suggestions for them for the upcoming year?
Well, of course, I want to wish everybody a good break, and I hope everybody does have a bit of a break. This has been a very difficult and hard year. I also want to say thank you to everybody who I think it's true that every family, everybody has given up something. We've all sacrificed a lot, and I want to thank everyone for all the work you've done, whether you're on the front line or you're a parent who's had to help and give up a lot of things to help your kids, or whether you're a student who's been struggling with working online. I want to thank you for all that you've done.
Well, thank you for being on our show, Marit, and we will be happy to bring you back in the New Year's.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Well, keep on watching the Grewalz Show on Punjab Star TV, on YouTube. Google it. If you have any comments or suggestions, let us know. If you want someone to be a guest on our show, let us know. We'll be glad to bring that person over. And until next time, Sat Sri Akal.